What started as just another reality TV reunion quickly turned into one of the most explosive showdowns we've ever seen. The tension didn't build, it detonated. And when Yandy delivered one sentence that froze the entire room, careers, marriages, and reputations were left hanging by a thread. The room was charged, electric, as if the air itself knew a storm was imminent. It didn't slowly build. It erupted, sudden and unavoidable. Cameras captured every heartbeat, eyes locked on the eye of the hurricane. Rasheeda, you could read the tension in her clenched jaw, each tightening and releasing like a fuse about to ignite. And then, with barely a flicker of provocation, a glance, a smirk from Yandy, the dam shattered, Rasheeda slammed her hands onto the reunion table, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the studio, making several cast members jump in startled unison. Her voice trembled with barely contained fury. "I'm not doing this with y'all," she snapped. "Sit next to her while she toys with my marriage, while she disrespects everything I've worked for." Yandy didn't move a muscle. That was her weapon. Absolute stillness. Legs crossed, sipping water as if she were at a day spa rather than in the epicenter of a televised meltdown. The contrast was brutal. The louder Rasheeda roared, the smaller she appeared next to Yandy's calm, calculated silence. "You're mad at me, but your problem's right here," Yandy finally said, her voice smooth, deliberate, and cold, eyes locked on Rasheeda with unblinking precision, each word landing like a scalpel on exposed nerves. Her gaze wasn't just warning, it was judgment, measurement, and declaration all at once. Rasheeda felt the weight of it as though the room itself had narrowed, the air pressing down, suffocating, each second stretching into an eternity. Kirk shifted in his seat, trapped somewhere between disbelief, dread, and a quiet panic he couldn't mask. All night he had been a ghost, a silent observer, his presence barely registering except as a faint silhouette beside his wife. Now, though, as Rasheeda began to unravel, he stepped in. The motion was almost automatic, a straightening of his jacket, a subtle adjustment of his posture, but it was clear, even to the most casual observer, that he had no idea what he was stepping into. There was no plan behind it, only instinct and the hope that, somehow, taking up space would stabilize the chaos. "Y'all not going to do my wife like this?" he said, calm in tone, but his eyes betrayed the lie. They flickered, nervously scanning the room, catching the edge of the cameras, the tension of the crew, and the eyes of the cast, who now watched him as if he were a man balancing on the edge of a cliff. He was bracing, consciously or not, for the backlash that was coming like a hurricane no one could hold back. And backlash arrived almost instantly. Social media, the omnipresent jury, exploded. Twitter didn't hesitate, the timeline filled with sharp, mocking commentary. "Not Kirk trying to be a husband now. Kirk finally has an opinion. What a plot twist. Didn't know he could talk." Each tweet carried a sting, not because it was cruel, but because it carried the weight of collective memory. Every user scrolling knew the context, the DNA tests, the scandals, the betrayals, and now they were witnessing the man's loyalty, or lack thereof, in real time. TikTok, a platform built on spectacle and dramatic pacing, stitched clips together almost immediately. Rasheeda screaming, her voice rising to the ceiling, juxtaposed with the infamous hot tub scene. The images carried irony sharp enough to cut, highlighting Kirk's history of questionable decisions and public humiliation alongside the raw, immediate chaos of the reunion. Users layered dramatic violin tracks, cinematic soundscapes, and slow-motion edits that amplified the tension and the perceived absurdity of the moment. Loyalty from Kirk, the same man who had made a DNA test a headline plot twist, a personal betrayal turned entertainment, was now being celebrated and scrutinized simultaneously. Yet Rasheeda, despite the chaos and the biting irony, seized his defense like it was gold. She pointed at Yandy, chest rising and falling with each heated breath, her voice cracking but fierce. "That's loyalty, you'll never know." She wasn't wrong. In her mind, Kirk had just taken a stand finally after a night of silence that had felt like abandonment. In that split second, Rasheeda clung to that moment as if it could erase the years of doubt, the scandal, and the betrayal. But the truth was merciless. No matter how fervently she declared it, no matter how forceful her gesture, this wasn't a victory. It was desperation in its rawest, most unadorned form. The veneer of control she tried to maintain could not mask the deeper reality. The public, the cameras, and the cast all saw it for what it was. No one truly believed in Kirk's loyalty, not after the cheating revelations. Not after the public DNA test that had humiliated the family in front of a global audience. Not after Atlanta had mercilessly turned their marriage into a meme factory. Every misstep, every scandal, every viral clip from years past had formed a cumulative narrative that this reunion could not undo. The theatrics of the reunion didn't obscure the past, they highlighted it. They amplified it. The cameras, the lights, the rolling microphones were not neutral observers. They were participants in the theater of accountability. Every shout Rasheeda made, every passionate gesture, was magnified, dissected, and broadcast to millions. The irony of claiming loyalty from a man with such a notorious history only deepened the scrutiny. Fans remembered the public moments, the DNA test that called paternity into question, the social media memes that reduced intimate marital pain to punchlines, the viral videos of confrontations that played on loop. And yet, in the midst of all this chaos, Rasheeda tried. She fought to reclaim the narrative, to assert control over a scene that had long since escaped her grasp. Her voice was loud, demanding, carrying authority she desperately wanted the world to recognize. She spoke of years of dedication, of being the cornerstone of the franchise. The one who carried the show when others faltered. But words alone, no matter how impassioned, were insufficient. Because when your history is public, when every failure and scandal has been catalogued and broadcast, asserting dominance verbally cannot erase the context viewers already hold. The cast watched, some in silent sympathy, some in veiled judgment. Erica's eyes narrowed, calculating, weighing the drama's impact for the cameras. Mendez shifted in his seat, exhaling slowly, muttering under his breath in disbelief. Every movement, every subtle expression contributed to the tapestry of tension, each silently reinforcing the stakes at play. The reunion was no longer just a conversation. It was a living narrative of power, loyalty, and humiliation in real time. Meanwhile, Kirk remained a study in contradictions. His calm tone, his upright posture, was juxtaposed against an underlying tremor of nervousness. The audience could see it in the minute details, the slight tightening of his hands, the way his jaw clenched, the microsecond glances that betrayed uncertainty. This was a man caught between obligation and fear, between defending his spouse and acknowledging the truths that had already made their rounds on social media. Each second of silence became more damning, more telling than words ever could. And the public did not let it go unnoticed. Memes, tweets, TikToks, they became evidence, proof of the moment's significance and failure. The digital world quickly turned it into a referendum on Kirk, on Rasheeda, on the institution of loyalty itself. Fans argued, dissected, and relived every clip, creating a narrative that extended far beyond the studio walls. Every share, every comment, every reaction was a reminder. In the age of social media, silence can speak louder than any defense, and public perception can be a cruel, relentless judge. Rasheeda's eyes flicked toward Kirk in a fleeting plea, a silence say something that went unacknowledged. Her chest heaved with frustration, panic, and the raw need for affirmation. But the man she had once publicly defended, the man whose loyalty she now championed, offered nothing. Not a word, not a glance. Just the cold, unmovable presence of someone immobilized by history, fear, or a combination of both. That moment crystallized the reunion's truth. This wasn't a story of triumph. It was a story of desperation, of trying to stitch together a narrative that reality had already complicated beyond repair. And in that desperation, the world witnessed the fragility of human loyalty, the limits of public perception, and the inescapable weight of a past lived in the spotlight. As the cameras rolled and the footage circulated, the layers of tension deepened. Every viral clip, every meme, every social media post reinforced a single truth. The theatrics of defense could not outweigh a history that had already been broadcast, scrutinized, and immortalized online. Rasheeda's fervent defense of Kirk may have been heartfelt, but it was also a poignant reminder that loyalty in the public eye is never measured in intention alone, it is measured in action, consistency, and credibility. Even as the reunion drew to a close, the echoes of that moment lingered. Social media continued to churn, dissecting every nuance. Fans debated endlessly, some supporting Rasheeda's loyalty claims, others questioning the sincerity of Kirk's silence. Analysts dissected body language, tone, and timing, turning the intimate spectacle of a personal confrontation into a global case study in human behavior, accountability, and perception. In the end, it was clear, this scene, this confrontation, wasn't just television drama. It was a microcosm of public scrutiny, a vivid illustration of how loyalty, trust, and reputation intersect in a world where every action is observed, archived, and judged. Rasheeda's desperation, Kirk's inaction, Yandy's precision, they were not just characters in a televised argument. They were symbols of the complex, often painful dynamics that play out when private lives become public property. And every human flaw is magnified by the unrelenting lens of the audience, and through it all, one truth remained unshakable. No matter how loudly you proclaim loyalty, no matter how fiercely you defend, history and perception have a weight that no outburst, no declaration, no desperate defense can erase. The reunion may have been over, but the consequences, the scrutiny, and the relentless public memory were only beginning to take hold. Yandy leaned in, her tone measured, surgical. "Funny, how you trust him now," she said, never once breaking eye contact. "Back then, you needed a DNA test." The room seemed to inhale in unison, a collective shock that hit like a physical blow. Rasheeda's face fell, the color draining as if someone had yanked the life out of her. She tried to respond, to fire back, but nothing came out. Her lips parted in silence. And silence, in moments like this, hits harder than a scream. Producers zoomed cameras in, whispers rippled through the cast. Erica smirked behind her hand. Spice let out a slow, impressed whistle. Mendes muttered under his breath, "Damn, that's cold." And it was icy, precise, undeniable. Rasheeda scrambled to regain her footing, yelling about how she carried the franchise, about her queenly status in Atlanta, about how without her and Kirk, the show wouldn't even exist. But the more she shouted, the more hollow it sounded. When you have to remind everyone you're a queen, you're already not. Kirk sat like a prop present, yet irrelevant. Every rising pitch of Rasheeda's voice reached for him, a silent plea for intervention, for rescue, for validation, but he remained frozen, hands clasped, eyes glued to the floor, as if the ground could swallow the chaos. And that silence screamed louder than any argument. Fans watching knew exactly what it meant when a man doesn't step up. The room fills in the answer for him. Yandy didn't have to raise her voice. She didn't have to fight. Leaning back, letting her words linger and land, she let the room simmer. Her first strike had already left its mark, but she wasn't finished. "You keep calling it loyalty," Yandy said, smooth as velvet over steel. "All I see is fear. You don't trust him. You cling to him." Rasheeda's chair screeched against the floor as she lunged forward. "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know anything about my merit." Her voice cracked, sharp and thin, a sound of panic, not power. The mask was slipping, cameras rolling, the walls closing in. The cast shifted uneasily. Erica glanced around like she wanted to vanish. Spice stared straight into the camera, foreseeing the fallout. Producers hovered, uncertain whether to intervene or let it play out. This was gold television. One woman unraveling, another controlling every thread. Then Yandy struck again. "You keep screaming about respect," she said, eyes narrowing. "But baby, respect don't live in your house." Gasps reverberated. Even the camera crew flinched. Rasheeda's mouth fell open, unprepared for that jab. Her fists clenched the table, words fumbling out like they were choking her. "You think you better than me?" she spat. "You think this little moment makes you somebody?" Yandy smiled, slowly cruel, quiet. "No," she said, "but it makes you nobody." Behind the scenes, a few stifled laughs broke through. Someone let out a loud, unmistakable "damn." Twitter exploded with side-by-sides of Rasheeda's flushed face and Yandy's calm smirk. TikTok set dramatic violin music over the confrontation. The verdict clear. The internet had already chosen its champion. Rasheeda wasn't finished. Her gaze darkened, a new energy spiked venom, something colder than panic slipping in. "You want to talk about my man?" she hissed. "Let's talk about yours." Mendes said behind your back he couldn't even stand you, tolerated you, not loved you. The cast froze. Erica blinked. Spice murmured, "Oh no." Even producers hesitated, unsure whether to cut or let the drama unfold. But Yandy didn't flinch. She laughed lightly, casually, dismissively. "At least when my man disrespects me," she said, calm and cutting. "It's not in front of millions. I don't have to relive my humiliation in reruns just to keep a paycheck coming." Rasheeda's breath caught. Yandy's voice dropped lower. "You got a title nobody respects." That line landed like a quiet punch, subtle, yet bruising enough to linger for days. The room didn't react instantly. For a heartbeat, it hung there, a suspended shock. Then it hit. Spice gasped. Erica covered her mouth. Mendes shook his head in disbelief. Rasheeda didn't speak. She couldn't. The sting wasn't in the insult. It was in the certainty that the world agreed. Yandy didn't wait for approval. She didn't need it. Her calm alone reverberated louder than any cheer. But she wasn't finished. From her purse, she pulled out her phone. A tap, and the unmistakable soundtrack of the infamous hot tub clip filled the room. Splashing, Kirk's voice, women giggling, that same viral footage that had already haunted the internet. Time slowed. The room froze. Rasheeda's face lost every trace of color. Her lips parted, ready to scream, but no sound came. Every eye darted between her and Kirk, who sat frozen, wishing he could vanish into the floor. The footage played louder, relentless, mocking. On the screen, Kirk's earrings gleamed a glaring testament. "This is what loyalty looks like to you," Yandy said quietly, letting the images speak. Rasheeda snapped. She lunged at the producers, slamming the table so violently the microphones jumped. "Turn that off. Y'all trying to make me look weak? I've carried this show for years, and this is how y'all repay me." No response. Not a single word. The cameras continued to roll, their unblinking lenses capturing every nuance, every twitch, every hesitation. The studio lights glared down, relentless and unforgiving, illuminating the smallest details, the glimmer of sweat on Rasheeda's temple, the subtle trembling of her hands, the tight curl of her fists. She turned to Kirk, desperation in her eyes, tugging at his sleeve like a drowning woman clinging to a raft in a stormy sea. "Say something. Deny it. Defend me." Any word, any gesture, could have shifted the tides. But Kirk remained still, frozen as if time itself had stopped. His gaze was fixed on the floor, eyes tracing invisible cracks, as though he were witnessing his own house collapse around him, powerless to intervene. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, filling the room with a tension that was almost tactile. You could hear the faint hum of equipment, the subtle scuff of feet against the floor, and the collective, unspoken holding of breath. Everyone in the studio felt it, the weight of a moment that had no escape hatch. Rasheeda's chest rose and fell rapidly. The energy she had carried, the fiery intensity of her outrage, now threatened to collapse under the sheer weight of Kirk's inaction. Every instinct screamed at her to rally, to fight, to seize control of a situation that was slipping through her fingers. Yet in that silence, her power seemed to evaporate. Yandy, standing across from her, folded her arms, tilting her head slightly, a gesture so simple yet laden with meaning. "Why you got all this energy for me?" she said slowly, deliberately, her tone smooth but cutting, but none for him. The room collectively inhaled. Gasps punctuated the quiet, punctuated by the subtle shifting of feet, the faint clatter of a chair leg against the polished floor. That wasn't just shade, it was a mirror, held up with precision and purpose. And Rasheeda hated what she saw. Every ounce of fury, every accusation she had launched, now reflected back at her, magnified by her own eyes. The woman who had once commanded attention, who had roared across screens with authority, now felt exposed and vulnerable, a queen stripped of her crown in front of the entire nation. "Why is it easier to call me Dusty?" Yandy continued, her voice calm/measured, almost serene, than to call him disrespectful. The question landed like a seismic aftershock. It vibrated through the room, shaking even those who had prided themselves on neutrality. Cast members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Erica, ever the observer, flinched, her carefully neutral expression cracking just enough to reveal a flicker of doubt. Spice leaned back slightly, eyebrows raised, silent acknowledgement passing over her features. Mendez muttered something inaudible, barely a breath, but it carried weight, a testament to the shared understanding of what was unfolding. The silence was no longer a passive state, it was an active participant, compounding the humiliation. No one spoke, but everyone knew the truth. Rasheeda tried to respond, her voice quivering under the immense pressure, cracking like porcelain under stress. "Y'all trying to destroy my family?" she sobbed, mascara streaking down her cheeks in messy rivulets, evidence of her human vulnerability. "You jealous? You could never be me." Her words, though intended to assert dominance, fell flat. The room remained still. No applause, no solidarity, no validation. In that instant, her carefully constructed image of control and power disintegrated. She wasn't queenly, she wasn't commanding, she was cornered, small, exposed in the glaring light of cameras that recorded her collapse in real time. The camera zoomed in, catching every drop of Rasheeda's vulnerability, the tremble of her lips, mascara streaks carving lines down her cheeks, the heave of her shoulders as she tried to hold herself together. "I gave everything to this show. Everything," she whispered, the words fragile but heavy with sacrifice and frustration. Yandy didn't rush. She rose slow, brushing off her dress like dust from battle. "I don't need to prove anything to you," she said, voice sharp as ice. "The truth is already on tape. The world's seen it doesn't need edits." Calm, measured, authoritative. Her composure cut deeper than any scream. Behind her, Rasheeda slumped further, shoulders trembling under the weight of judgment. Kirk stayed silent, eyes on the floor, his absence speaking louder than words. The silence between them was a chasm no shouting could cross. Even the crew felt it, microphones catching every breath, producers exchanging wary glances. This was raw television, real and unedited. Outside, social media erupted. Clips of Rasheeda's tears and Yandy's poise spread instantly, dissected frame by frame. Hashtags trended, memes flew, but the sharpest voices weren't mocking, they were questioning. Who was the other DNA test about? What else was Kirk hiding? Rasheeda's collapse wasn't just about loyalty anymore. It was about truth. And when the crowd starts doubting your story, it's not the enemies you fear most. It's yourself.